Welcome back to Lessons from the Front and to the Oosterbeek Military Cemetery here in the Netherlands. Today, Fireteam Elias wishes to remember those who made the final sacrifice in the liberation of Holland. And although many young men made the ultimate sacrifice during Operation Market Garden, Fireteam Elias would particularly like to remember one Major Soper who perished in the streets of Elst while clearing buildings in the advance of the Worcester Regiment towards Arnhem. After leaving Oosterbeek Cemetery, I travelled south via Arnhem across the Nederrijn to Elst, onto that stretch of land the soldiers knew as the Island. This area, bounded by the rivers the Lower Rhine and Waal, became a bitterly contested battleground in the final stages of Operation Market Garden. Although much has changed since 1944, key landmarks remain, silent witnesses to the desperate struggle fought there. So I'm in Elst, and behind me there, top of the screen, you can see the church bell tower where the Germans had observers during the Battle of Elst. It was round about this point where Major Soper was killed in action whilst crossing the street with some of his troops in a bid to clear out some of the buildings. To understand why Elst mattered so much, we need to take a look at the wider context. By late September 1944, Operation Market Garden was faltering. The airborne divisions had captured many key bridges, but Arnhem, the most important of them all, was slipping out of Allied hands. The British paratroopers at Oosterbeek were surrounded and fighting desperately to hold on. Their only chance of relief lay with 30th Corps, driving north along a single narrow highway. Every village, dike and crossroads became a defensive strongpoint for the Germans, who were rapidly reinforcing the area. Elst lay directly on the route to Arnhem, with its narrow streets, solid buildings and that commanding church tower that formed a natural defensive barrier on the island. For 30th Corps, taking the town was essential. For the Germans, holding it meant preventing the relief of Oosterbeek and ensuring the collapse of the Arnhem bridgehead. To set the stage for this game, Wei Lun and I created a 12 by 9 foot table representing the British advance into Elst, and we built it entirely in secret so that players would walk into a complete surprise. The table was orientated from the southwest, beginning at the Deracht farm on the Muizenbergstraat, the point where our scenario's British forces would step off from. And I'm standing on the Muizenbergstraat that leads to Elst in that direction. It was along this road that D Company, commanded by Major Soper, advanced to take the town from the Germans. Now, in reality, the Deracht family farm lies roughly 7 kilometers southwest of Elst, but we included it on the tabletop to give the Worcester Regiment a clear historical starting point while condensing the distances to keep the game playable. From that starting position, the table stretched towards Elst, with two key landmarks dominating the far side of the battlefield, the Elst Church Tower on the left and the Elst train station on the right. Before the game began, only one player was allowed to see the battlefield from the British team, Eugene Lim, who served as the British team commander for the day. His task was to plan the attack and draw up a map without his team seeing the table, so he alone was invited in early for the first look. Eugene Lim's reaction, seeing the table for the first time, made this entire scenario worthwhile.
Oh my god! Wow! That was a recordable moment. Oh wow! This is wow! Okay.
Alright, so Eugene, you get a moment to draw some maps, get your directions. While Eugene Lim begins sketching out his map of the battlefield, let me quickly introduce you to the members of Fireteam Elias taking part in today's game. Helping me run the scenario and to my immediate right is Wei Lun, who worked closely with me to ensure everything ran smoothly throughout the day. For the British 30th Corps side, we have Rafa, WK, Eugene Lim, whom you've already met, Andrew, who flew in especially from Thailand to join us for today's game, Tam, Francis and Fauzi. On the German side, we have Arif, Alfred, who is a German CNC, and Dash, another German player. Alvin would be arriving later, so is not in this photograph. A special thank you goes out to Expedimix for allowing us to use large portions of their shop's terrain, and to Elias Community Centre for providing this wonderful venue in which this game was filmed. A big thank you goes to Darren too for arranging lunch for the whole group, a real morale boost during a long multiplayer battle. If you enjoy this kind of historical scenario recreation and want to help spread awareness of what we do here in Singapore, please consider subscribing and sharing the channel. It's really helpful and your support matters a great deal. Once Eugene Lim had drawn up his map, I then privately briefed him on the British objectives. Okay, Eugene, so you've got 3 objectives. The City Hall, St. Martin's Church, and the Elst train station. Those are your 3 objectives, all right?
All right.
So for you to have a victory, you need all 3. For you to have a draw, you need 2 of them.
All right.
I also gave Eugene an individual objective he was not permitted to share even with his own teammates. As he was representing Major Super, if he could maneuver the model representing Major Super into the church, he would gain an additional victory point, a bonus that could potentially turn a loss into a draw or draw into a win. I wanted our historical hero to have the chance to influence the outcome of today's game. Once briefed, Eugene Lim moved next door to plan with his fellow British team players. I then briefed Alfred, who was representing Major Knaust. Not wanting to influence the German deployment, all I told Alfred was what the 3 objectives were, but not their weighting. This meant that the German team would need to defend broadly, just as their historical counterparts did. And with that, the stage was set, a game shaped not only by tactics and dice, but also by the memory of Major Super, whose courage at Elst still speaks for all who fought and fell there. Before we start this battle, let's take a quick look at the forces involved. For this game, we used Warlord Games' Bolt Action version 3 rule set, with both sides fielding 6 platoons each, though with very different strengths. On the British side, 30th Corps was represented by a combined 4,500 point force built around the infantry of the 43rd Wessex Division. Leading the way was Major Super's own rifle platoon, composed largely of veterans and mounted in a mix of trucks and Bren carriers. Supporting them were 2 additional rifle platoons from the 4th Battalion, Dorset Regiment, forming the main British infantry assault. Armoured support for the British came from 2 tank platoons of the 13th and 18th Hussars. Each platoon fielded 2 Sherman 5 tanks and a Firefly, with a second platoon reinforced by a Churchill Mark IV to give the infantry some extra close support punch. Completing the British list was an armoured car platoon representing the reconnaissance elements of the 1st Worcestershire Yeomanry, scouting ahead for the main advance. The German force, totaling roughly 3,000 points, reflected the mixed formations holding the Elst perimeter on the 24th of September. At the core stood a rifle platoon representing Decker's SS Panzergrenadiers, supported by an inexperienced Volksgrenadier platoon. Capturing the ad hoc training and replacement units rushed into the line during Market Garden. Long-range firepower was provided by Stahl's anti-tank battery, which included 2 PaK-40 heavy anti-tank guns, while a separate heavy weapons platoon added additional infantry support. Armour came in 2 elements. First, an armoured platoon representing Heinz Wolff's tank company, featuring a Panther and 2 Panzer IVs, and then a second, Knaust's headquarters group, which fielded an assortment of half-tracks and support vehicles, including an SD KFZ 250, a Panzer III, a 2519 Stummel, a SD KFZ 10/4 with a 2cm flak gun, and an SD KFZ 7/2 armed with a heavy autocannon. Together, these units formed a determined defensive force prepared to hold the line around Elst.
The German deployment was basically to anchor the flanks with infantry and the center with anti-tank guns. The heavy panzer platoon was to skirmish out of Elst train station and engage enemy armor. Reserves were held for reaction to enemy actions. The intent of the plan was to hold the town of Elst as long as possible.
I played Major King, commanding the Armoured Reconnaissance Company of the 1st Yeomanry. Eugene Lim had tasked me with using our special rule, which was a free move before turn 1, to prove the German positions around the railway station. So right from the start, I pushed the armoured cars straight up the road towards the station, hoping to flush out anything hiding there. The Germans had hidden deployment, and as soon as turn 1 began, a Panther and Panzergrenadiers Mark IV opened fire on us from either end of the station, revealing exactly what we feared. The German armour was covering the whole sector. I hit the reconnaissance move immediately and tucked my armoured cars into blind spots between the enemy tanks.
Now that we knew where the German armor was, I tasked Fauzi and his Shermans with keeping those panzers tied down, so that Tom could push his infantry and engineer up along the railway line towards Elst station. At the same time, I asked Francis, one of our new club members, to advance his infantry through the woods to try to split the German defenses. For my own push, I took Major Super's platoon, mounted in Blankan carriers and trucks, supported by WK's Dorsets, directly towards the Elst town centre. My plan was simple. First, capture the city hall. Then, continue towards the church, where I hope to fulfill my secret mission. I asked Rafa to support WK and my left flank with his Shermans, just to keep up with the momentum going across the entire line.
Rafa's Shermans rumbled up the left flank, pushing through sodden fields north of Elst. As soon as they crested the rise, the tanks unleashed a storm of fire, main guns and MGs hammering the Panzergrenadiers dug in around the shattered remains of the farmhouse. The Germans were pinned hard, forced to hug the rubble as shells burst around them. But the going was painful for the Shermans. The rain-soaked ground sucked at their tracks, slowing their advance to a crawl. Rafa could see the problem. At this pace, his armour wouldn't reach the town centre in time to support the main assault. Making a snap decision, one of the Shermans peeled off, grinding back onto the Musenberg road and gunning its engine to link up with Major Super's push into Elst. Major Super's column reached the outskirts of town just as the first German shots rang out. Pack 40s barked from their concealment, their rounds smashing into the leading lorry. The truck skidded to a halt, forcing the squad inside to dive desperately into the roadside ditch as splinters and smoke filled the air. A brutal firefight erupted around the city hall. Bullets slashed across the square as Super scrambled to safety, narrowly dodging a lethal burst and throwing himself in with a squad sheltering against the windowless side of the building. Sensing the British push building around the city hall, Arif ordered his Panzergrenadiers to fall back towards the town. They pounded down the narrow farm tracks and slipped through the hedgerows behind Elst, arriving in time to meet the British advance. From cover, they unleashed a fierce wall of fire across the hedges, hammering the lead British squads and forcing them to pull back. With the immediate threat blunted, the Panzergrenadiers pushed forward and occupied the city hall, securing the building before the British could regroup. The Germans may have seized the city hall, but Major Super was still very much alive, and the British reinforcements were rolling up the Musenberg road. Now let's move across to the other side of the table, where Alfred has just called in an off-table artillery barrage, right as the Dorsets were arriving and preparing to push up along the Nijmegen-Arnhem railway line.
Hunderte von Batterien aller Kaliber tragen den Tod in den Feind.
So this is it?
Yes, so now you're roll for everyone.
Okay, then this one.
Right, so artillery's coming in, right?
Down. Hey, go down. I go down.
This is straight, so 2 pins on this command team as well.
Although the barrage did not destroy any units, the effect was immediate. The British advance on the right was pinned, including Tom's Dorsets, Fauzi's Shermans on the bridge, and the lone Churchill, which shuddered to a halt as they emerged from the woods. But the British would not be stopped. With the Paris at Arnhem bridge clinging on and crying out for relief, every moment mattered. Fauzi's Firefly lined up a shot and let fly. The round struck home with the brutal clang, not quite killing the Panther, but locking its track and leaving the beast immobilized. Seizing the moment, Dash swung into action, knocking out Andrew's armored car lurking in the shadow of the station buildings. His triumph, however, was short-lived. Fauzi's Shermans at the bridge opened fire, hammering his armor, the Panzer IV's crew desperately putting out fires and badly pinned.
I requested an airstrike to take out the remaining enemy tanks that were hindering our progress into the town.
One plane carries 8 projectiles, 4 under each wing. They can be fired separately or in one devastating salvo.
You need a longer arm.
Several types of plane are equipped with rockets, and great results have already been scored, and very successful they are.
Although Alfred's anti-aircraft fails to shoot down the incoming Typhoon, the Air Command has sent an inexperienced pilot, and guess what? He mistakenly targeted our own tanks, and thank God, he was too inexperienced to inflict any damage on us.
With the German armour occupied and shaken, Tom surged forward with his Dorsets, advancing once again towards the station, their primary objective now within reach.
The engineer lead the assault, clearing the path of the hedges and the raised embankment.
With Tom's Dorsets fast approaching the station, I ordered Alvin's Volksgrenadiers to come in from reserve to reinforce our defense at this strategic objective. Alvin's inexperienced squads were no match for the Dorsets, and although the fighting was intense, the British captured Elst station.
While the firefight is going on, my third section, which is led by my assistant, Francis, he actually hide in the wood, waiting for opportunity to launch an attack. Just nice. They saw a damaged Panzer IV nearby. They actually charged and assault the Panzer IV, and the Panzer IV will put out action swiftly. At the same time, my Piat team worked their way through and scored a sniper shot against the Panzer side armor.
With all the German panzers knocked out and the railway station firmly in British hands, we'd secured our first objective. I now used my armoured cars to mop up the German vehicles and to ease the pressure on our battalion that was still attacking City Hall.
And with that, we swing back now to our hero, Major Super, was still fighting tooth and nail toward the objective. Eugene Lim and WK's reserves arrived just in time, pouring fresh strength into Super's battered line. Raff's Shermans were now thundering rounds into the City Hall, forcing the Panzergrenadiers inside to keep their heads down as the British closed in. Major Super rallied his men for one final push. They stormed the City Hall and room by room cleared out the defenders in brutal close-quarters fighting. The building fell, but the square outside remained contested. The German troops still held the approaches, and the British attempts to break them completely were beaten back. For a moment, it looked as though Alfred's cool, calculated defense of the town centre would hold, earning the Germans a well-deserved 2-1 victory. But then WK acted. What followed was a string of audacious, game-changing moves. First, WK's SMG squad, who had dismounted under the very muzzles of the two Pak-40s, opened fire and cut down the crew of the gun guarding the right-hand side of the square. Moments later, a Piat team stepped up and lobbed a perfect shot into the 251 Hanomag, blocking the road to the church. The explosion tore the vehicle apart, and suddenly the route to the objective was clear. WK didn't hesitate. He gunned his half-track forward, racing up the road towards the church. Alfred's insurance policy, a reserve Panzer III lurking behind near the church, fired desperately but missed. The chance was gone. And with the final order of the final turn, WK's men disembarked and flooded into the church, claiming the objective as the stunned Panzer III crew looked on, victory slipping from their grasp in the last breath of the battle. Right, so we just have a look at the objectives. So, Alfred, are there any troops inside? Do you have any troops inside there? Right, so the British have secured an objective here, so they've got the church, 1 point.
That's a surprise.
All right. The British have secured the train station, right? 2 points. And who had this objective? You had that objective, so then the British came here, you still had that objective. Yes. So this is actually a German objective still, because you weren't able to clear the Germans away from that objective. So the overall score is two victory points to the British, 1 victory point to the Germans. British needed 3 victory points to win. So it is a draw. And I guess it actually reflects the situation historically. So historically, the British were never able to break through and relieve Arnhem, even though historically the British eventually captured Elst. Right, so it's a draw. Well done, everyone. Great game.
Major Super lived through our game today. His role at Elst carried forward in the story we all tried to recreate on the table today. In reality, Major Super would give everything only days later, leading from the front as always, refusing to leave his men behind. He and many like him never came home. What we played today was only a game, a way to remember, to learn, and to honor. The real courage belonged to those who fought, who endured, and who fell. We roll our dice in comfort because they stood in the mud and fire so long ago. To Major Super, to the soldiers of Elst, and to every name carved in stone, lest we forget.